Picture this: 2 million years ago, Africa wasn't just home to lions, elephants, and crocodiles, it was also the stage for one of evolution's strangest experiments. A creature walks upright like us, yet its face is dominated by massive jaws, bulging cheekbones, and a skull crowned with a bony ridge like a helmet. Its teeth are flat, wide, and powerful, so powerful that scientists call it the Nutcracker Man. This is Paranthropus, a being that survived for over 1 million years beside our ancestors, and then mysteriously vanished. Why did these robust cousins thrive for so long, only to disappear completely? Did they lose a battle for survival against early humans? Or did nature itself stack the odds against them? Their story isn't just about bones in the dirt, it's about what it truly takes to survive when the world itself is trying to wipe you out. 2 million years ago, Africa was a land in transition. Forests were thinning, grasslands were spreading, and the climate swung wildly between wet and dry seasons. For any creature trying to survive, adaptation wasn't optional, it was the difference between life and death. Out of this crucible stepped a being unlike anything alive today, Paranthropus. Upright like a human, but with a face that looked forged for battle. Their jaws were enormous, their cheekbones flared outward like the wings of a shield, and a strange ridge of bone ran along the top of their skull. That ridge, the sagittal crest, wasn't just decoration. It anchored jaw muscles so massive that Paranthropus could chew plants tougher than rawhide. Where lions and saber-toothed cats ruled with fangs, Paranthropus ruled with molars. Their teeth were flat, thick, and strong, designed not for tearing meat, but for crushing seeds, roots, and fibrous stalks. Imagine the grind of bone on stone, repeated all day long, that was their survival strategy. This earned them the nickname, the Nutcracker People. But their story isn't just about eating, it's about specialization. While early humans experimented with new diets, tools, and ways of living, Paranthropus doubled down on one approach: brute strength and a plant-based menu. And it worked. For more than 1 million years, they endured droughts, predators, and shifting landscapes. To call them primitive would be wrong, they were survivors. But survival came at a price. By locking themselves into a narrow lifestyle, Paranthropus was betting on stability in a world that was anything but stable. At this point in the story, one question rises above all others: was Paranthropus a success story, or a ticking evolutionary time bomb? Dawn breaks on the African savanna. If you were Paranthropus, your day would begin not with the hunt, but with the endless search for food. Survival meant eating constantly, roots tugged from the earth, stalks of tough grasses, and nuts cracked open with those colossal jaws. Where early humans might have needed stone tools, Paranthropus carried their tools in their skulls. But food wasn't their only concern. Danger lurked everywhere. Imagine standing only 4 feet tall, with leopards, hyenas, and saber-toothed cats prowling nearby. Without sharp weapons or fire for protection, your best defense was the group. Fossil evidence suggests Paranthropus likely lived in social bands, much like modern primates. Safety came in numbers, with watchful eyes scanning the horizon for predators. Their daily life was a delicate balance between endurance and vulnerability. They had the strength to chew through nearly anything, but not the flexibility of early Homo species, who began experimenting with meat, tools, and strategy. It's possible Paranthropus had some simple tool use, we can't rule it out, but if they did, it was nowhere near the innovation of their human cousins. Still, don't mistake them for weak or unimportant. These were survivors who lasted over 1 million years, longer than many species ever dream of. They were perfectly adapted to their world, moving through woodlands and savannas, finding food where others starved. Yet, as the climate shifted, cracks began to appear in their survival strategy. Being strong wasn't always enough. In a world that demanded flexibility, could a specialist like Paranthropus truly last? For nearly 2 million years, Paranthropus thrived, and then, they vanished. No written records, no myths, no trace in human memory. For millennia, they were ghosts of prehistory. That silence broke in 1938, when a South African cave gave up a skull so unusual that scientists didn't know what to call it. Wide cheekbones, massive molars, a jaw shaped for crushing, it didn't look like Homo, but it clearly wasn't an ape either. This was Paranthropus robustus. Decades later, in East Africa, came an even more dramatic find, a skull with jaws so oversized it earned the nickname Nutcracker Man. Officially named Paranthropus boisé, it became one of the most iconic fossils ever discovered. Suddenly, the story of human evolution was no longer a straight line. It was a branching tree, with Paranthropus standing proudly on one of its limbs. What made these discoveries so powerful wasn't just the bones themselves, but what they revealed about survival. Layer by layer, fossils showed that Paranthropus endured dramatic climate swings, ice ages, droughts, and shifting landscapes. For over 1 million years, they held on. That's longer than our own species, Homo sapiens, has even existed so far. And yet, unlike our ancestors, there's little sign of innovation. Their bones tell us about strength, but not about art, fire, or complex tools. No carvings, no cave markings, just skulls and teeth that speak of endurance through brute force. Paranthropus forces us to confront a haunting question: is survival about raw power, or about flexibility and imagination? They were proof that strength could sustain a species for ages, but perhaps not forever. And so, as Chapter 1 closes, we are left with a mystery: what happened when these robust survivors shared the land with our ancestors? Imagine the African plains 2 million years ago, not just filled with animals, but with multiple kinds of humans. Early Homo species were beginning to appear, experimenting with stone tools, eating meat, and showing the first sparks of adaptability that would one day define us. And walking right beside them was Paranthropus. The sight would have been striking. On one side, the smaller, more flexible Homo, shaping stone flakes to cut meat from a carcass. On the other, the sturdier Paranthropus, jaw grinding on roots and nuts, their massive skulls looking almost alien compared to ours. They weren't rivals in every way. After all, they survived alongside each other for nearly 1 million years, but they were following two completely different evolutionary strategies. Homo bet on innovation. Stone tools, scavenging meat, maybe even early cooperation in hunting. Paranthropus bet on specialization. Strong jaws, a plant-based fallback diet, and bodies built to endure. The question scientists still wrestle with is, how did these cousins interact? Did Paranthropus and Homo compete directly for food and shelter? Or did they simply occupy different niches, avoiding conflict most of the time? Fossils don't give us direct answers, but the overlap of their habitats shows one thing clearly: they weren't separated by distance. They lived side by side. And that raises a haunting possibility: did early humans witness the slow fading of Paranthropus? Did our ancestors, unknowingly, play a role in their disappearance? Or were the robust cousins already doomed by their own limits? What we do know is that this coexistence sets the stage for one of evolution's most dramatic stories: two different paths to survival, only one of which would continue. Day to day, life for Paranthropus and early Homo would have often overlapped. Both walked upright, both foraged across the same African landscapes, and both relied on their groups for safety. But when it came to survival strategies, they could not have been more different. Picture a riverbank. A group of Homo gathers around a scavenged carcass, using sharp stone flakes to slice meat from bone. The smell of roasted marrow or fresh flesh offers a high-energy meal, food packed with calories, perfect for fueling a growing brain. Not far away, a band of Paranthropus digs up roots and chews fibrous reeds, their jaws grinding endlessly. Their diet kept them alive, but it lacked the same concentrated burst of energy. This contrast mattered. Meat gave Homo not just calories but time. With energy-dense food, they could spend fewer hours eating and more hours exploring, experimenting, and developing new survival skills. Paranthropus, in contrast, may have spent up to half their waking life chewing just to keep going. Strength in jaws, yes, but less flexibility in lifestyle. It's also possible that competition did flare up. Both species would have fought over safe shelters, water sources, and sometimes even the same plant foods. Fossil sites show overlapping territories, suggesting that conflict, whether direct or indirect, was likely. But coexistence didn't mean equality. With tools in hand, early Homo began reshaping the landscape. They cracked bones, butchered animals, and possibly even used fire in its earliest forms. Paranthropus, meanwhile, remained tied to their natural abilities, tough jaws, big teeth, and nothing more. Slowly but surely, the balance of survival tilted. In a world that demanded adaptation, Homo was rewriting the rules, while Paranthropus was holding steady to the old ways. What ultimately set early Homo apart wasn't just diet, it was imagination. While Paranthropus relied on raw biology, Homo began to rely on ideas. Picture a small group of early humans working together, some keeping watch, others crafting sharp stone tools, while the rest carve meat from a carcass. This wasn't just survival, it was strategy. Each new tool, each shared task, freed them a little more from the limitations of their bodies. They could cut, scrape, and pound food in ways Paranthropus could never match. They didn't need massive jaws anymore, their tools did the chewing for them. This shift had ripple effects. Cooperation meant shared defense against predators, group hunting, and passing down knowledge from one generation to the next. Slowly, the world itself became more negotiable for Homo. For Paranthropus, the world remained a constant grind of chewing and foraging. And yet, it's important to remember, Paranthropus wasn't weak. They survived alongside Homo for nearly 1 million years, longer than many failed species ever managed. They weren't outclassed overnight. But as climates shifted, resources thinned, and Homo's toolkit grew more sophisticated, the balance tilted further. It's here that we start to see the contrast sharpen, two different visions of survival. One, rooted in brute endurance. The other, in adaptability and creativity. Both worked, for a time. But only one path would eventually dominate the future. By the end of this chapter, we're left staring at a turning point in human evolution. Was Paranthropus quietly pushed aside by their inventive cousins, or were they simply victims of a harsher, changing world? The answer lies in their disappearance, a mystery that continues to puzzle scientists today. For over 1 million years, Paranthropus endured. They weathered droughts, predators, and shifting landscapes. By all accounts, they should have been a success story. And yet, somewhere around 1 million years ago, they disappeared forever. Why? The truth is, no single cause explains their extinction. It was likely a storm of challenges. One leading theory is climate change. Africa's environments grew increasingly unpredictable, swinging between lush green periods and harsh arid droughts. For a specialist like Paranthropus, this was dangerous. Their powerful jaws allowed them to eat tough plants, but if those plants vanished, what then? Unlike Homo, who could hunt, scavenge, and experiment with new foods, Paranthropus may have found themselves trapped by their own specialization. Another factor could have been competition. Early humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. With stone tools, fire, and social cooperation, they carved out an advantage in nearly every niche. They could process food that Paranthropus could not. They could expand into new habitats. Every gain for Homo might have been a quiet loss for Paranthropus. And then there's the chilling possibility of direct conflict. Did early humans push Paranthropus aside, not just by outcompeting them, but by force? The fossil record doesn't give us clear evidence of violence, but given the survival pressures of the time, it's not unthinkable. Whatever the cause, their disappearance leaves a haunting silence. Fossil layers that once held robust jaws and skulls suddenly go empty. The line of Paranthropus ends, and in its place, the Homo lineage rises to dominate the future. But their extinction raises an unsettling question: if Paranthropus could thrive for 1,000,000 years and still vanish, what does that say about our own species' long-term survival? Scientists have wrestled with the disappearance of Paranthropus for decades, and three major theories dominate the debate: climate change, dietary limits, and competition with Homo. First, climate change. Around the time Paranthropus was fading, Africa's landscapes were transforming. Wet, forested areas shrank, while open savannas expanded. Their fallback foods, roots, tubers, and fibrous plants, may have become harder to find. Early humans, on the other hand, could turn to hunting, scavenging, and even cooking, broadening their menu as environments shifted. Flexibility was a shield, specialization became a trap. Second, dietary limits. Those massive jaws that once seemed like a superpower may have been their undoing. Paranthropus invested heavily, evolutionarily speaking, in eating tough vegetation. But when drought struck, the very plants they depended on may have vanished. Imagine being built like a living food processor, but finding the shelves suddenly empty. Strength meant nothing if there was nothing left to chew. And then comes competition with Homo. Fossil evidence shows that both groups lived in the same regions. But Homo was armed with something Paranthropus never mastered: technology. Stone tools allowed access to new foods, fire expanded diets further, and cooperative hunting brought in high-calorie meat. Each innovation tipped the balance of survival in their favor. Over time, Paranthropus may have been squeezed out, outcompete not only for food, but also for safe spaces and resources. Some researchers even wonder if Paranthropus extinction was the inevitable result of evolutionary bottlenecks. They may have survived long enough to hit a dead end, simply unable to evolve fast enough to keep pace with a changing world. Their fossils tell us they were tough. Their disappearance tells us toughness wasn't enough. When the last Paranthropus vanished from Africa's plains, no one mourned. There were no stories, no burials, no memory passed down. They disappeared quietly, leaving behind only scattered bones sealed in rock. For nearly 2,000,000 years, they had endured, and then, in the blink of evolutionary time, they were gone. And yet, their story still echoes. Paranthropus is a reminder that evolution isn't a ladder with one winner at the top. It's a branching tree, full of experiments. Some branches continue. Others end. Paranthropus was one of those experiments, successful for an age, but ultimately unable to adapt when the rules of survival changed. What makes their story haunting is how familiar it feels. They were upright, social, and capable. They weren't failures. In fact, they thrived longer than Homo sapiens has been around so far. And still, they vanished. That raises an uncomfortable question for us: if Paranthropus could thrive for 1,000,000 years and still disappear, what about us? Are we really immune to the same forces: climate shifts, resource competition, ecological collapse? Or are we just another branch, waiting for our time to end? But maybe that's the real legacy of Paranthropus. They remind us that survival isn't guaranteed. It demands flexibility, imagination, and resilience. They show us that strength alone is not enough, and that even the most robust can fall. So the next time you bite into a nut, chew a root vegetable, or wonder how our ancestors survived, think of Paranthropus, the Nutcracker People. Their bones may be silent, but their story speaks volumes about who we are, and what it truly takes to last in an unpredictable world. The story of Paranthropus is more than ancient bones in a museum. It's a mirror, showing us how fragile survival can be. For over 1,000,000 years, they stood strong against predators, droughts, and shifting landscapes. And then, silence. A reminder that even the toughest can fall when the world changes faster than they can adapt. So what do we learn from them? That survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about being the most adaptable. About creativity, flexibility, and the ability to adjust when everything around you shifts. In that sense, Paranthropus isn't just an evolutionary mystery, they're a warning. And maybe that's why their story feels so relevant today. We, too, live in a changing world. Will we be like Homo, reshaping our future with imagination? Or like Paranthropus, powerful but locked into a path that can't bend? What do you think? If Paranthropus had been just a little more adaptable, could they have survived, and lived alongside us today? Or was their disappearance always inevitable? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey into deep prehistory, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more stories that peel back the mysteries of our past, and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. Because the story of humanity isn't just about us, it's about all the others who walked beside us, who remind us just how fragile survival really is.